Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast, aka CTP, in association with thelibertybeacon.com. And I am your host, Joseph M. Lenard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome. As I joked on the Miss Liz Tea Time reunion show the other day, we have Mae, maybe not, with us today.
That's right.
Mae Renfroe, or maybe it's Renfroe. I don't know. Is it French?
No, that's enough. Renfroe. Might be. I don't know.
That's what I figured. That's what I figured.
Mm-hmm.
And for those wondering why I'm wearing a Rick Springfield shirt today on the episode, if you're looking behind the scenes at this video sneak preview on YouTube or Rumble, I'm wearing the Rick Springfield Shock, Denial, Anger, Acceptance Tour shirt. His tour dedicated on the concept of loss, which we will be discussing, his rendition of the transition, the stages of grief, shock, denial, anger, acceptance. Others categorized as 4 or 5 stages. It all breaks down to about the same thing. But yeah, Rick Springfield, the I wish that I had Jesse's girl guy. But while I think that song is catchy and somewhat clever, to me it's one of the worst songs he ever recorded. And he gets
I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know.
Oh, okay, he gets stuck with that. But the shock, denial, anger, acceptance double record and DVD behind the scenes set with his hit Beth. No, not a remake of the Peter Criss Kiss Beth song. From his effects days, he took over for David Cassidy doing the effects show, which I saw 6 times, the Rick Springfield version. I wish I still had my autographed guitar from him. It's kind of a long story that me and my now ex-wife got from him backstage at MGM. But anyway, we're here to discuss the issues of loss. Why don't you go ahead, tell us a little about yourself, your background, and go from there.
Okay, and like my story of loss, you mean? Okay, yeah. So I'm Mae Renfroe. I am the mother of 10 children, actually, ages 23 to just over 1-year-old. So, and a homeschool mom. So busy with the children and all of those things. We do some traveling between our Texas home, where I am right now, and our Alberta, Canada home. So we do that, and that is fun as a family. And I've written a few books, including our book that I've written on our story of loss, and this is kind of all the things. I've got a YouTube channel, and I'm being a guest on podcasts. So yeah, and that's who I am now. And I grew up in the faith, knowing Jesus as a young child. Like I knew him as a child, and at a very young age, I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to serve God, would give him my life. And so I got married at, how old was I? 20 or about 20, I think. And we had 8 children by the time our story of loss happened, or in 2017, April of that year. We had just had our 8th baby. She was about 3 months old, and then we lost our 14-year-old son. And he went for a little ride on a 4-wheeler. We didn't use them as toys. Like, we weren't allowed to play around or anything, but he just asked if he could go over by a dugout on our property up in Alberta, Canada, to go look for ducks at the dugout. And so and he had been outside looking for something to do, and then just came in and said, can I go over there? And I'm like, okay, sure. I actually didn't hear him ask about the 4-wheeler, and I didn't really pay attention to that. I'm like, okay, see you later. And that is actually the last time I seen him alive. So he went over there, and when we found him later, we didn't see no sign of him playing around. Like, it looks like he just got on the wrong angle on this very little bit of a hill, and it flipped and rolled over, and it was on him. It had rolled over on him. So just so sudden, so tragic. So, you would never see that. You would never think that could happen on that hill. When I finally went over there a few months later, because I couldn't bring myself to do it. My first, initially, my husband and the older sons ran over, and when they found him and all of this, and I couldn't bring myself over there. But when you look at it, and it was like, that just doesn't seem possible. So right off, with my faith in God that I had mentioned that I had, I felt that he would still be with us if he was meant to be here. And I'm like, it was simply his time to go, because there's no other way you could explain on a hill like that how someone could kill themselves or say, oh yeah, that day in that instant, when we found out he's dead, and I was praying that God would bring him back to life if it was meant to be. I knew God could do that, and my faith was strong. I felt it was strong. I was like, God, you can bring him back to life right now if this is your will. But it apparently wasn't, and he just gave us the comfort and the peace to carry it out. And boy, I felt a peace, like a peace I can't even begin to describe. I felt the peace and just was like, well, this is your plan somehow. I don't know how, but you've allowed this to happen in our lives. So our lives were like flipped upside down, you might say. I mean, just in an instant, our little cozy family of 8, with the oldest was 16 at the time, my little baby of 3 months, and everything looked fine and dandy, and then just boom, lost our
Yeah,
son.
well, losing a child is really tough. Now, like my
Mhm.
parents, or my grandparents, I mean, on my mother's side, her would-be brother, older brother David, dialed just died just after childbirth, so she never knew him, and it
Oh,
it took
okay.
years for them to get over that grief to then have my mother as another child, and then so she ended up growing up as an only child rather than a brother and sister. But I want to make something clear here in case
Mhm.
someone's reading the transcript, because you said killed himself, and by which you mean, of course, someone
Yeah,
somehow accidentally getting in an accident that resulted in his death.
it was an accident. Yeah, it was not like anything. Yeah, like trying to commit suicide. No, not at all. It was an accident. But yeah, what I'm just meaning is that how could a person end up dying on a hill like that? That's what made me feel that um it was just his time to go, and that I always felt that time is in God's hands, and accident, like we can get injured, whatever, but like death is something that doesn't just happen until it is the time. He is, the author of life, the author, the giver, and taker of life. If you how you feel on that, but yeah,
So
I'm glad
it's,
you clarified that.
yeah, just in case, because again, someone might read a transcript and
Mm-hmm.
somehow accidentally also take that out of context and read something into it that doesn't belong. But it is rather amazing to me that your faith allowed you to move past in the album cover term the shock, which I'm sure was there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that you doesn't sound like any denial nor any real anger, although
Mm-hmm.
obviously you lose a child, you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
upset, but you
Mm-hmm.
had the wherewithal and the faith to get you through, plus having so many other children, you couldn't dwell and wallow in that grief and neglect your other children, that you were able to quickly move to acceptance, and
Yes.
that
Okay, for sure.
of course we will all see him
Mm-hmm.
in the greater, more important life hereafter.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, definitely that faith then is what helped, because I know it is really hard, and those that, yeah, like the denying or being in anger and over it, and I never was like, and I wasn't blaming God. Sometimes heard people say that, to say when I say that God allowed it, it's almost like blaming him. I'm like, no, I'm not blaming him. I just know that he is, control of all things, and he allowed allowed that to be for, and I was okay with that. I accepted that. I was like, okay, your will, but yeah, it was hard. I mean, there was times later on when I am like, when I would realize, like, say, injury, I was accept that. I realized, I told the boys, if they do, they're careless and stuff, you can get an injury, but I'm injury, not death, and like, not death. So I would be, where it was hard, but I'm like, the game just, but not my will, not, not my will, but yours, God. And this is what you allowed. So I say yes to your will, and I kind of carry on again
Yeah.
with his peace that he gave
Well,
me.
on this earth, I think sometimes evil things happen. So I don't necessarily always agree that it's God's will
Mm.
that something may or may not have happened. In evil things, bad things sometimes happen to good people, whether or not they're overall part of God's plan can be debated. But
Yeah,
yes,
I know what you mean. No, there is a lot of things. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I know where you're coming from, but I just wanted to kind of make that clarification because, uh, yeah, some people are definitely, I truly believe, taken before their time, but God's will and God's overall purpose, I think, is often woven in the fabric of many different people. It doesn't rely on one individual person for a particular part of his cause and his will. What do you think of that?
Yes, that sounds, yeah. Yeah, because there is others situations, and I've tried to think of that. Well, if someone in a total different situation, like a school shooting or something like that, I mean, it does, this definitely seems different than my son's situation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not to diminish, of course, the loss of your son. Your son, who knows, could have gone on to very great things. Like I, as a believer in life, even my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book has a suicide prevention thread in it. Nothing to do with this, but it factors into loss because some people do lose people to suicide,
Oh,
that
yeah.
all life matters. You don't know what someone may go on to do, and even indirectly, right? Like I say, I just went to the theater the other day and saw It's a Wonderful Life. We're recording this in December, just so people know. I'm
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
exactly sure when this will air, but so if you hear me say, I just went to the theater and saw It's a Wonderful Life, it's because we're talking in December. And I always like to say to people, right, be someone's Clarence. You may not have stopped a druggist from poisoning a child and destroying multiple families' lives, but small things you do add up that help other people who then may have a child that goes on to cure cancer. Well, those little things you did then helped cure cancer in a way. What do you think of that
Wow.
concept?
Wow. Yeah, that is good. Yeah. You never know. Those the little things, those little choices. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
like
sure.
Clarence says in It's a Wonderful Life, people don't know the impact one's life has upon
Hmm.
others
Yeah.
and everything as
Yeah.
a whole, the
Yeah.
master plan of things.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
we're not going to get a Clarence come down and show us what life had been like had we not been born or if we weren't here.
Hmm.
But you also said now you're
Oh,
a
for sure.
homeschooler, and I love that. I'm glad. I'm fascinated by that. I never had children myself. My sister also was married twice, never had children. I always say, and I go into in my ChristiTutionalist Politics, the book about homeschooling, that anyone who can definitely should, because they need to still get the core R's, the reading, the writing,
Hmm.
arithmetic, history, science. You see what I did there? Because kids
Hmm.
are so dumb these days, they don't know that an R doesn't belong in science. But those core R's, because instead today in the indoctrination factories, they're getting what I call the new R's: radicalism, raunch, and racism.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. So, yeah, I really support homeschooling and really, it's very important, very good. I was a homeschooler myself. I know not everyone can homeschool. So, I mean, I'd say, not everyone can, but yeah, I was, realized that no matter how much you would want to or not, but I was, homeschooled myself. And so right off when I was young, I just was like, no, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to homeschool my kids. And so I started just right off when they were, was time to begin at kindergarten, we started homeschooling. And so my oldest is 23. So, and he was 5, I started him. So it's like, it'd be 16, 17 years I've been homeschooling now. And it's hard. It's a full-time job. It's it's not for the weary. I mean, it's for the long haul. But I've learned some things that just make it easier, and realize put school into every day so that you're doing and learning and educating your children and these things in every day when they're just helping around the house and stuff too. And so I think that lessened my load a bit in that way, and just to be easy on yourself. And yeah, but what your kids are learning and what they're not learning, and they're teaching the kids quite the things nowadays to be okay with a lot of things that's not okay with God. God is clear about what he's not okay with in the Bible, and the system is trying to get kids to be okay with that, and we just can't be. So that was, that's my reason. That was my parents' reason of homeschooling, was the bad influence in schools, and that is the reason we homeschool as well. And then we get flexibility to be able to travel and stuff. We've done a lot of traveling back and forth from Texas to Canada that we wouldn't have been able to do. And so that's really neat as well. There's a lot of traveling families. They called it road schooling, actually, where they travel, and that's kind of, they do, paper school too, but part of the learning is going to places and actually being at this place instead of reading about this place, places of history and stuff throughout the States or whatnot. And there's many ways to learn.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it. In my book, Terror Strikes, there is also a sub-thread. It's not a book about death. It's a book about living, and so many more things than just the terrorism thread that kind of weaves the whole storyline and sub-themes together. I mentioned Hope, Martin, the main character's wife, can't homeschool because she works too, but it's her role to make sure to be involved and understand what they are learning, and finding and taking the time to do a bit of homeschooling to whatever degree they can, and counter the garbage and the lies and the propaganda that they get, and reinforcing the good stuff, the core values stuff. Now, what are some of your homeschooling resources?
So different the curriculums we use? I mean, like I've used a variety of curriculums over the years, but like right now we're using ACE workbooks, Rod and Staff. Christian education was a big one that we really liked. Teaching textbooks for math, and then those their CD-ROM. Right now, I have a daughter that's doing a lot on online classes called Spark Pals, I believe Spark Learning Pals, and it's online, and you pay so much for a year for the family, and then they do classes where they're interactive with their teacher, they're interactive with the students, they can see the other students on there, and that's really neat too. But it's on your own, like you don't you can do the classes whenever you can. Well, no, it's on their schedule, but I just meant, I mean, if you have to miss a class, it's not a big deal too, but that's really neat. She's able to do stuff that I couldn't teach her at home. So that's kind of, sometimes I'm not into art. I can't do art. She's doing all this art stuff online, and ones that can do things that's kind of extra that I wouldn't be able to help them with. So there's a lot out there. Back when my mom was homeschooling, she didn't maybe have as many resources, but there's so much resources now that it's just limited. I mean, the stuff that you could just print off for worksheets and whatnot online, and YouTube videos to teach your child different things. For math, there's some things in math that's hard for me to teach. I'll just look up something on math, on fractions, and or with algebra, it's hard, and just do that. So there's a lot out there. I use mix and match and use a lot, and I think a lot of homeschooling families do that too.
I'm glad you mentioned the art, because one of the major digs on homeschooling is that they don't get a really full-rounded education. Now, I do have concerns about their ability to socialize and social skills, but generally homeschooling parents still have them involved in like a sport or some club or
What's
whatever.
called
So
co-op. A lot of them do co-op.
yeah,
It's
so
called yeah.
they still get that, but you mentioned the arts, because we really do believe in a full, well-rounded education. You know, that's part of the leftist attacks on homeschooling, that we're somehow, our children are somehow missing something. They're not, but we're
No,
not
they're not.
putting the priority on stuff that is, at the end of the day, not as important to being able to make a living in life and things of that nature. Your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. But no, homeschooling is well-rounded. You can get everything at home. You know, some of it we're just maybe not into as much, but with like say the musical instruments and all of that, you can learn all that right at home, or a class. You know, you go to take your lessons somewhere, your paddle lessons or whatnot. My husband plays the guitar and banjo, so he's been able to teach the kids some. So he does that, and there's some that does have a bit of interest, but and then the art and all kinds of stuff, you can learn that, be very well balanced. And most homeschool families don't have an issue with the social. That's kind of, we find that a little strange, that, you know, because they're always out and around other kids, and they're with older people too, so they learn to interact and everything. There was another thought I had when we were talking. Well, yeah, and a big deal for me is that my children are well knowledgeable in the Bible and grounded in that. And so in our homeschooling, they get that every day, because we do Bible reading in the morning with them. I help the kids with read straight out of the Bible. They have a time they read, and I just sit and help them with the difficult words and explain it. And then in the curriculum itself, it's talking about spiritual biblical stuff. And so they get in it all the time. And in the evening, we read together the Bible as a family, and then I do their devotions. And so it's like throughout the entire day. And that's to me, that's got to be a very big part of the education. You may feel like, well, that could be left out, and you can still educate to get your jobs, but I mean, no, we're living a victorious life in Christ, and we got to be grounded in the word. So that's a big deal to me. This should be a very big part of their education, and
Yeah,
part
there
of the
won't
daily
be
life,
any threat of any
you know.
of your kids doing artwork, selling to the Chinese by snorting paint through a straw like Hunter.
Oh no.
And I always like to joke a little. So I can hear Media Matters now reporting. Joseph M. Lenard, the ChristiTutionalist Politics, has backwoods woman on who is teaching her kids the banjo. Think of the movie Deliverance, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's certainly not that going on.
No.
But anyway, let's talk. I think I can know where you're going to go with this, because I think your children losing a brother probably took their cues from you and followed your lead. But did one or more of them have more of an issue or trouble or problem having lost a brother than the others?
Some did, yes, and because of their age. And so because I had right down little ones that didn't comprehend so much. They still talk about and miss him, and you know, we have the pictures of him that they get to look at. And but yeah, definitely older. So the ones that really kind of, you know, I'll talk about the two oldest boys our oldest boy. See, he was our second oldest one we lost. So our oldest at the time was 16. We lost the 14-year-old. Then we had a 12-year-old. So with the 12 and the 16-year-old, the 16-year-old was a writer like me, because I really like writing, and he was a writer, and he wrote a little booklet called Sunshine from Death, I think it's called, that and he turned his grief into writing. And the first entry he wrote was, I lost my younger brother 3 hours ago, and he's writing. And so that was healing to him. He turned his grief into writing, and now it can help somebody. So that that's what helped him. And he had a really strong faith. And then the 12-year-old, well, it really, really shook him. He definitely, maybe he wasn't mentally able to handle it as well as the other one. That we've just really consoled him and talked to him about how, again, I felt, that, with that situation, that it really wasn't an accident, though we called it was an accident, but it was like that, God's hand was with him, and he allowed that. And so we just processed that with him, but it was really, really hard. I mean, he told me later, like, one of the things he did was really turned into work. I mean, at 12 years old, he was just a play-free kid, but he just turned, like, where he was just always very productive, very hardworking. And he told me recently, he's 18 now, and he's off on his own, renting, working, and just very go-getter. And he told me that one of the things he did was kept himself busy, tried to work so hard that he couldn't think. So, but he does love the Lord too, and all that, and he knows that it's God's, it's helped him. But that's kind of how he handled it. That was
Yeah, I can relate to that. I am 61. All our grandparents are gone. Both of my parents are gone. I have my sister, my younger sister, left, and we have dinner all the time. Full disclosure, I mean, we are literally recording the day after Christmas here. I just had Christmas dinner, of course, with my sister the other day, but I do that. While most podcasts pre-record a bunch of shows, then play them through the holidays, they take the holidays off. Me, I prefer to keep busy because to keep my mind off all that stuff, the family that isn't here that I can't celebrate with anymore, and to avoid depression in myself. So now you mentioned he wrote, which is good, and we've touched on that you're an author. Now, do you just have one book or multiple books?
More books, actually. This one, I can just pull it up right here. For those that can see it. So that's the story of our loss, holding on to hope, a family story of tragic loss and the hope that keeps us going. That's the subtitle. Yeah, so that's on that. I wrote it after 4 years. I was blogging. As soon as I lost him, I started blogging. So the writing, like my son did, but I took 4 years after to turn it into a book, and that's on our loss, the day it happened and everything, and things I was feeling and going through. And then I would say, here's like a scripture that helped me, that could help you, or songs really helped me, the praise and worship, and or something somebody said. And so I turned that into the book. 4 years after losing our son, and I think I call it my book of hope. But yeah, I have a few other books I wrote before that. 2 was from my blog to book, and I'm even not I'm self-published author, and those were my first books. I'm not quite as proud of them because I feel very self-conscious about them, but there's some good content, in them. And then a little book encouraging mothers that I was working on the time I lost our son. I was in the middle of working on that book, and boy, I put it on hold for a while because I was on the computer writing when he came in to tell me I'm going to go for a ride over by the dugout, and then I'm just like, I looked at him and glanced, but it was just like, oh, it's okay, see you later. And I went back to that. So, it was really hard to actually continue when that was the last thing I was doing when I lost him. So I realized that I was like, no, I'm doing this to encourage mothers. That's why I started it, and I'm going to continue. So I finished that one. And then I have one about Psalms as well, on the, bunch of beautiful verses in Psalms. So yeah, I've gotten a few other ones. This was my last, though, Holding On to Hope. Put it out just a couple of years ago, and I don't see anything else in the near future. I just busy, and I like being guests on podcasts. So I've been doing that and trying to find places to speak in person. So really feel God laid that on my heart to be able to speak and give that hope and encouragement that He's gave me, and that comfort He's gave me, and that's what I really want to do. So
Ann Miller is on the same imprint as me, Illumify Media / McHenry Press. She's got since I wrote my terrorism book, she also has a book about loss. She is a 9/11 widow, and she wrote Falling Pieces, which is a very, very good book about dealing with loss. And again, I mean, something
wow.
so out of the blue
Yeah.
and unexpected that you're dealing with. And I'm glad you mentioned the blog to book thing, because my middle internationally available book, I'm the holder of over 36 copyrights, but I only have
Oh,
3
wow.
books that are currently internationally available. And that middle one is How to Write a Book and Get It Published, Hints, Tips, and Techniques. And I talk about in that book how anyone who's ever done blogs is a ready-made author, because you can
Oh,
take your
okay. Oh, wow.
blogs, make them chapters, expound
Yeah.
upon
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah.
you've got a book. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned music. It's funny because, for the heck of it, I created a ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast on Spotify official music playlist. So, because
Oh, okay.
music is important. It
Yeah.
can help heal.
It does. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I really helped him. Found it helpful. Sorry, it really helped me tremendously. The healing and the words of the songs. I mean, you got to be choosy, I guess, with the songs. That it was, well, praise and worship. So you can't really go wrong there. But there was also then some of the artists had lost someone. One of them, Jeremy Camp, had lost his wife to cancer, and then Stephen Curtis Chapman. There's songs of his that he had lost a little daughter, and other songs that they were going through storms and going through things of life. And boy, those really spoke to me. I was like, because they know what it's like. They're not just singing this song, but they've been there, they know, and they're still saying God is good, that he is faithful, that and all these things, and it is so good. Yeah, really, really helped me. I'd sing along or just have it playing, and really soothing, comforting.
Yeah. Well, another Rick Springfield album is called Karma. If I had to pick a favorite Springfield album, it would be that. And one of the songs he has on there is Prayer. I send a prayer to heaven to be a better man than the man I see, which is kind of his Michael Jackson Man in the Mirror type, song, right? Look to yourself first. Look yourself in the mirror. Are you doing good in the world or not? And can you do better? But I wanted to ask before, do you have an author website with all your books? Like I have josephmlenard.us. Do you have an author site with all your books?
Yeah, I do have a website, so I guess you could call it an author website, because I do have my books on there. Yeah, mine's just maerenfroe.com.
Okay, that's easy enough. And again, it's
Mhm.
Renfroe, not Renfroe. Yeah.
No, Renfroe. And so, yeah, I have my books on there, and then my blog is right there. And I think I have a link to my YouTube channel and some of the other podcasts that I've been on. I have a list of some of those there. I need to update it, but I have that.
Yeah,
And
on my TerrorStrikes.info/interviews, I've got an interviews page, mainly
okay.
dedicated to interviews about my terrorism book, though, but
Mhm.
also regarding how to write a book and get it published. I generally promote my ChristiTutionalist Politics book, of course, through this show. But I want to thank you so much for your time. Mine is not a very long show. I'm still
Okay.
only in my first season, technically, so I
Mhm.
don't want to run up 1.5 hour episodes, because I think no one's going to listen to a show they've never heard of before for an hour and a half, right? So I
Yeah,
tried.
sometimes not. No.
Is there anything else you want to share before we end?
Oh, wow. Just, that your faith in God is so important to get through these difficult things in life, that I really can't point any other thing to help you get over loss and grief, but only to God and to God himself. And that I hope that those listening would find their hope and their peace and their refuge and their strength in God, because it's all there readily available. That's what he wants to give us, his hope. And that
Yeah,
he'll be everything to you that he's been to me. It's that
I'm glad
constant
you
rock.
said hope, because again, now going back to my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, I mentioned Hope, the wife of Martin, during the homeschooling discussion. when I was writing the book, originally her name was something else. What it was didn't matter, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, because my book, even though it's on terrorism, is a very non-traditional, clearly not a fluffy kind of Christian book, but it is a Christian book nonetheless. And I like to say about my book, yes, about terrorism, but not book about death, but life and living. Life over death, hope over fear, key one there, faith over despair, love over hate, good over evil, individualism over collectivism, the politics aspect, freedom over tyranny, more political aspect, family and friends, life. But I want to repeat that hope over fear part. So I renamed her. I was thinking charity, a Christian name, faith, hope, charity, joy, all those names. But it came to me that hope, because that's really one of the sub themes of the book. Hope over fear, not selling fear porn, and that we need to have that hope and our faith over despair. So calling her hope kind of reinforces that hope over fear, almost in a literal sense, even though that's a fictional character name.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thanks again, Mae Renfroe. Again, people can find you at MaeRenfroe.com. Check out your books, other podcasts you've been on, and things of that sort. Your blog. I'm going to go check that out after this recording. I have not seen your blog. As I said, we met on Miss Liz's Tea Time reunion show the other day. So I'm glad I met you. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via TerrorStrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, no fancy high production intro or inserts, at least yet, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast and share episodes. We need your help to grow the show.